We all probably have people in our lives or know people that are very friendly and generous and caring. We know people that if there's a need, we know that they're going to help meet it. We know those individuals that they are truly interested in the lives of others, in our lives. But the truth of the matter is, even those individuals that are friendly and generous and caring and loving, it does not mean that they are spiritually grounded. Many people, may have a belief in God, but they don't yet have a right relationship with Him. Many people know about God, but they don't necessarily know Him. And the good thing to know is the fact that God is always working to bring people to Himself. He is always drawing people to Himself. He listens to those who are calling out to them, and He guides those who are seeking that guidance. At the same time, He uses those that do have a right relationship with Him to be the listening ear and to be the guide for those that are seeking Him. Today we're going to be looking at Acts chapter 10, and it's a story of a man named Cornelius. One of these men, he was a friendly, generous, caring individual, and he knew about God, but he didn't have that right relationship with Him. And Cornelius, he has an encounter with an angel, and the angel sends him off to find a man named Peter, who in turn brings him into that right relationship with God. And this encounter shows us two things that God may do when He's reaching out to people to bring them to faith in Him. Number one is God encourages those who pursue Him. Verse 1 of chapter 10. At Caesarea there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion in what was known as the Italian regiment. He and all his family were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. One day, at about 3 p.m, he had a vision. He distinctly saw an angel of God who came to him and said, "Cornelius." Cornelius stared at him in fear. "What is it, Lord?" he asked. The angel answered, "Your prayers and gifts to the poor have come up as a memorial offering before God. Now send men to Joppa to bring back a man named Simon, who is called Peter. He is staying with Simon the tanner, whose house is by the sea." When the angel who spoke to him had gone, Cornelius called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier who was one of his attendants. He told them everything that had happened and sent them to Joppa. And so here's this story, a man named Cornelius, and we find out that he's a centurion in the Italian regiment, a man of power, of significance. And we learn that he is devout and he's God-fearing. He's a generous giver. He prays regularly. He recognized God, but he didn't know the gospel. He believed in God, he believed in that higher power, but he didn't know the gospel message. And the truth is, it is God that gave him that generous heart. He understood that there was that higher power. That's why he called out to him when he did. And because of his action, God brings Cornelius encouragement in the way of an angel. It tells us 3 p.m. Here's Cornelius, and an angel of God appears to him. And that angel proclaims to him, "The prayers and gifts that you have given have come up before God as a memorial offering. God is pleased with what you've been giving and what you've been doing. So here's your next step. I want you to send for a man named Simon, who is also called Peter." And so when the angel left him, Cornelius follows the angel's command. He calls for 2 of his servants, he calls for one of his soldiers, a devout soldier, and he explained to them what had just happened, the encounter he had with an angel. And they were sent to Joppa to find Peter at the house of Simon the tanner. What this tells us, what it tells me, I guess, is when there is an honest pursuit of God, he will bring encouragement and direction to those who are seeking him. You know, here was Cornelius, a devout, God-fearing, praying man. And he's reaching out to God. Now, there may be times that those that God is drawing to himself may seem like unlikely candidates to receive that relationship. But in pursuing God, there will be things that will need to be done. And those actions require stepping out in faith. Here was Cornelius. And the reason why he was an unlikely candidate is because he was a Gentile. When Jesus came, the initial part of the gospel message was to go to the Jewish nation, to go to the Jews. But now, and Peter was one of those. He was the one that was going to the Jews. He was the one that was preaching to the Jews. And now God is changing the script a little bit, and he's telling Peter to go to and reach out to these Gentiles. The truth of the matter is that there are many who know about God, but may not truly know about Jesus. You know, we may have generous individuals that are not part of a church fellowship. They don't have connections with a body of believers. There might be those that believe in God but do not have that right relationship with him. And because of that, it is good for us to be aware of those individuals and to connect with them. Because we might be the one God uses to bring them into that right relationship. So we need to open our eyes. Who are those individuals that maybe are on the outskirts? And maybe God will use us to be that encouragement to, as he's drawing them to himself, he's going to use us to be that catalyst by which or through which they come into that right relationship. But it is God who encourages those who truly pursue him. But number two, and this is for followers, number two, God challenges those who know him. Verse 9. About noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approached the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat, and while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw heaven open and something like a large sheet being let down to earth by its four corners. It contained all kinds of four-footed animals, as well as reptiles and birds. Then a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." "Surely not, Lord," Peter replied. "I have not eaten anything impure or unclean." The voice spoke to him a second time, "Do not call anything impure or unclean that God has made clean." Let me repeat that. The voice spoke to him a second time, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." This happened 3 times, and immediately the sheet was taken back to heaven. While Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was and stopped at the gate. They called out, asking if Simon, who is known as Peter, was staying there. While Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Simon, 3 men are looking for you, so get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them." Peter went down and said to them, "I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come?" The men replied, "We have come from Cornelius, the centurion. He is a righteous and God-fearing man who is respected by all the Jewish people. A holy angel told him to ask you to come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say." Then Peter invited the men into the house to be his guests. So the story goes from the angel talking to Cornelius, and Cornelius sending these men to find Peter, and it switches to now to Peter. And Peter tells us he went to pray, and as he was praying, he was getting hungry, he wanted something to eat, and God brings this vision to him of a vision of a sheet filled with unclean animals descending to earth. And a voice calls out to Peter, "Peter, get up, kill, and eat." And Peter's response as a good Jew was, "I've never eaten anything impure or unclean." And God says, don't call anything impure that God has made clean. This reference, it could be in reference to food. God's telling Peter, hey, here's all these unclean animals. Back then, unclean animals, the Jewish nation, they were not allowed to touch, to eat those animals, or they would become unclean. And here God is flipping the script, changing the script. He's saying, I want you to go, get up, kill, and eat. But in this case, God's reference was to the Gentiles. The Jewish people were the clean animals, and the Gentiles, they were the impure, unclean animals. And God's saying, do not call anything impure that God has made clean. So he's saying, you Jews are not the only ones anymore. It's the Gentiles too. But that was a challenge that was given to Peter. Peter's wondering about the meeting of the vision when the men that were sent from Cornelius arrive at Simon's house. And the Spirit tells Peter that the three men are there to get up, to go downstairs and meet with them, but then not hesitate to go with them because God has sent them. And so Peter met the men and said, I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come? And the men explained the reason for their visit. It's everything that Cornelius had experienced. That they came from Cornelius, the centurion, that he was a righteous man and a God-fearing man, and he was a man that was respected by all the Jewish people. And the angel told him to ask you to come to his house, to share the news or the message that you have for us. And it's at this point Peter welcomes them into his house in which he was staying. So this encounter would have been a great challenge for Peter. He was a Jew sent to the Jews with the gospel message. He followed the Jewish law. He would not eat unclean animals, and he stayed away from those things that were impure. But again, God changed the script. The image of the sheet with the impure, unclean animals, get up, kill, and eat. I've never eaten anything unclean. But do not call anything impure that God has made clean. Peter's eyes were opened at that point to the meaning of the vision. The Gentiles were considered impure, unclean people by the Jews. However, God was claiming that he has made them clean. Not by their own works, not by their own abilities, but by the gospel of Jesus Christ. God was showing Peter that it was okay to welcome them into his home and into his life. But this is a challenge for us as well. God is wanting all people to come into a relationship with him. You think about that. He wants all people. He is slow in his return because he doesn't want anyone to perish. He wants everybody to have eternal life. And so he's working on all people. He is patient, giving the world time to reach out to him. And we can know that when we reach out, we will find him. Here was Cornelius, a Gentile, God-fearing, and he's reaching out to him. And he finds him because God intervenes through Peter. What we must realize is that this is for all people. The gospel message, the good news, it's for all people. It's not for people that are just like us, that look like us, that act like us. It's for all people. It's for all people regardless of age or race or locality or background or even sins. How many times do people in the church, we look at somebody and say, oh man, they're a lost cause. Their sins are too bad. And so we choose not to reach out to them because they're not like us. There is no group on this planet that is unreachable. All people are welcomed into his presence if they will simply accept him. Do we believe that? Do we believe that, or are we challenged by that to reach out to somebody that's not like us, but somebody that might be seeking after God but not sure how to get there? So some questions for us as we end this message. Who are some individuals in your life that may be believers of God but not necessarily followers of Jesus? There's probably many. There's probably many within the church itself that they believe in God and they're going through the motions, but they don't necessarily know who Jesus is. Who are those individuals? Are there individuals that God has been laying on our hearts that may seem unreachable, may seem like people that we don't want anything to do with, and yet God has placed them on our hearts, asking us to be the listening ear and that guide in spiritual matters? If we follow God's lead, as Cornelius did, as Peter did, we may be just the person to bring hope and direction to the one seeking God. Many times, however, it's going to take a leap of faith, a great leap of faith, to say that first word, to do that first thing, to start up a relationship, or to make that connection. It might be a great leap of faith for us to do that. That is the challenge before us. Because those that are truly seeking after God, God is encouraging them to keep pressing on. But then he's calling out to us and challenging us to take the steps needed to reach out. The question remains, though, are we ready to take on the work before us? Are we listening to the voice of the Spirit? Are we listening to our hearts where God is leading? And are we doing our part to bring the gospel message to the world? Just a thought. God bless you. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.